Hello and welcome to That Fabric Guy. My name is Basland and here on YouTube I will be teaching you every week on how you can use Microsoft Fabric. And this is a video in the series about Delta tables, and today we're going to talk about Parquet versus Delta. What are the similarities, what are differences, when would you use one or the other? And as the purpose of this series, I'm going to try to keep this short in a few minutes to show you the difference between Parquet versus Delta. The biggest difference is, I think, the fact that Parquet is a file format and Delta is a system. And what I mean with that is that Parquet is just the way that we can store tabular data on a file on disk, like we can with CSV files or JSON files. We can also do that with Parquet files. Parquet is an open source file format. It is column oriented, and that means that it is compressed by column. Maybe you know how Power BI semantic models work in the Vertipack engine, or how SQL Server clustered column indexes work. Parquet files are a bit similar. They compress data column by column instead of storing it row by row like a CSV file. This is very efficient for data storage, and it is efficient for analytical data retrieval, because when you retrieve data for analytical purposes, you usually do not need all the columns on a row. You need the customer ID, the date, and the revenue amount, and all the other columns you don't care about, so why would you retrieve them? With a columnar data storage format, it is very easy to retrieve just the columns that you need, and this speeds up your retrieval incredibly well. To put that into human terms, Parquet is a great file format for analytical purposes. Now, Delta Lake, on the other hand, is different. It is an open source storage framework that allows you to build a lakehouse architecture on top of data lakes. So usually on a data lake you can only store files, and with Delta you can store this lakehouse architecture with tables, with asset transactions, and all the goodies that we already talked about, or that we will talk about in future videos on this series. Delta tables store their data inside Parquet files, but the Delta part of this system is the layer that brings the table behavior to your lakehouse. And the key difference is very simple. In a Delta table you have a folder that is the Delta table itself, and that folder contains one or more than one Parquet files. So there's one or multiple Parquet files that physically store data. Then we have a subfolder called the Delta log folder, and inside the Delta log folder we have JSON files that point to certain transactions or commits that have been happening on that table. There have been writes and updates and deletes and so on. Then on the other hand, the Parquet file is just that. It is just this Parquet file. So while the Parquet file is the backbone of the Delta table, the difference is just a Parquet file on the one hand, or a Parquet file or multiple Parquet files together, combined with the Delta log being the Delta table format. Now, why don't we use Parquet files, just Parquet files, not Delta tables, but just Parquet files for building lakehouse architectures on a data lake? It just doesn't give you that table-like behavior. There's no transactions, there's no safe writes with concurrency. There's no history. There are a lot of things that are missing from using just Parquet files. And even though the file storage system is very efficient, the way that we can handle data and that we can write and read data is not that efficient for analytical purposes. It is efficient to just read from the file format, and that is the reason that Delta chooses to use Parquet. However, if we want to have multiple processes writing data into a table at the same time, Parquet cannot do that, Delta can. Because the Delta log tracks transactions, we can also build up history, and we can query the table as if it were any point in time in the history of our table. So we can query a table as if it were yesterday, and we get the state not just of the table but of the data inside the table as of yesterday as well. So where Parquet is excellent at just reading data, Delta is really excellent at managing the change that is happening in that data, and therefore Delta on top of Parquet is the right example or the right choice for your data lakes. Alright, to recap. Parquet is a columnar file format. It is optimized for efficient analytics by putting data column by column instead of row by row like a traditional file format, and that allows you to read just those columns that you need for your query. That makes reading fast and efficient. Delta, on the other hand, is a storage format, or a storage framework I should say, for lakehouse tables. It brings asset transactions, it brings the Delta log pointing to different states of the table and of the data in time, and it really allows you to build this lakehouse architecture on top of Parquet. Now, Delta is an extension on top of Parquet. Parquet is still the file format storage that we use inside Delta. And in Fabric, Delta is the default table storage that we use to build lakehouses. Even if we use Fabric Warehouse with the TSQL, we are still using Delta And we really see this behavior across different workloads. So in data warehousing and in data engineering, we're storing data in delta tables, and then we can consume those delta tables using a lot of different workloads as well, mainly on data engineering, on data science, on Power BI, and so on. The question therefore is not should we use Parquet or Delta. The question is, what are we storing our data in? Is that Parquet for its efficient reads? Yes. Is it Delta for all the transactions, for the history, for the write concurrency that we get? Also yes. Therefore we use Delta on Microsoft Fabric, powered by Parquet file formats. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next video. Do not forget to like this video and to subscribe to my channel.